Jin-Soo Park didn't believe in Christmas miracles. At 42, he'd seen too much blood on snow-white streets to believe in anything holy. He owned Chicago's South Loop. Every luxury high-rise, every underground gambling den, every politician's dirty secret. The Korean immigrant had clawed his way from washing dishes in Chinatown to commanding an empire worth $300 million. People whispered his name in reverence and terror. Jin-Soo Park, the man who never smiled, the ghost who moved through the city like smoke, untouchable, unstoppable, alone. But on this particular Christmas Eve, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the city's twinkling lights, Jin sat alone in the dark. No family dinners awaited him. His mother had passed 5 years ago in Seoul. He'd been too deep in a territory war to attend the funeral, a choice that haunted him every single day. His younger sister refused his calls, disgusted by what he'd become. The women who warmed his bed never stayed past morning, and his associates feared him too much for friendship. 42 years old, wealthier than he'd ever dreamed possible, when he'd arrived in America with $200 and burning ambition, master of everything he surveyed, except the gnawing emptiness that no amount of soju could fill. He didn't know that in a cramped apartment 8 miles south, a 7-year-old girl was about to change everything. Before we continue with this incredible story, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more amazing stories like this one. Also, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Now, let's get back to Jin's story. December 22nd arrived with brutal cold and the kind of darkness that settles into bones. Jin sat alone in his penthouse, overlooking Lake Michigan, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city's twinkling lights. The space was a monument to success. Minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Original artwork from Seoul hanging on stark white walls. A chef's kitchen he never used because cooking reminded him too much of his mother. Everything was perfect. Everything was empty. His phone rang, cutting through the silence like a knife. He glanced at the screen. Hae-won, his sister, calling from Seoul at what must be early morning there. He almost didn't answer. Their conversations always ended the same way, with her anger and his guilt creating an ocean between them wider than the Pacific. But something made him pick up, something like hope. Maybe, or just loneliness. Jin his sister's voice came through, tight with barely controlled anger. Uma's anniversary is next week. Will you at least send flowers this time? Or will you be too busy counting your blood money? Jin closed his eyes, the familiar shame washing over him. I'll send something, he said quietly, his English still colored by his Seoul accent despite 17 years in America. Money, his sister spat, switching to Korean, their mother tongue. That's all you ever send. Money for flowers for a woman who died ashamed of what you became. Do you know what her last words were? Jinna? Do you? He started, but she cut him off. She said she wished she'd never let you come to America, that she'd rather have her son poor and honorable in Seoul than rich and corrupted in Chicago. Those were her last words, Jin, and you weren't even there to hear them. Hae-won, don't. Don't what? Tell you the truth? You're 42 years old, Jin. Rich, powerful, and completely alone. Uma wanted grandchildren, family dinners, a son she could be proud of. Instead, she got a ghost who sends checks and breaks hearts. The line went dead. Jin stared at his reflection in the window, barely recognizing the man looking back. When had he become this? When had survival turned into empire, and empire turned into prison? His sister was right about everything. He had everything and nothing. Women came and went from his bed, never staying past sunrise, never asking his last name. His associates feared him too much for friendship, for honesty, for anything real. Young Min, his driver and bodyguard of 15 years, was the closest thing he had to a friend. And even young Min kept a respectful distance, never quite meeting his eyes, never quite relaxing in his presence. Jin poured himself a glass of soju, his mother's favorite drink. 20 years in America, and he still drank like a Korean. Still thought in Korean when he was tired. Still felt like an outsider in the empire he'd built with blood and ruthlessness. The soju burned going down his throat, but it didn't fill the emptiness. Nothing filled the emptiness. Not the money, not the power, not the fear-based respect. He was a king ruling over nothing that mattered. He grabbed his coat, suddenly unable to stand the silence of his penthouse another second. "Young Min," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. "The restaurant on State Street. I want to check inventory." Young Min appeared immediately from the security room, tall, broad-shouldered, perpetually alert. He'd been former Korean military before Jin had recruited him, and he moved with the precision of someone trained to kill. "Yes, boss," he said, his face carefully neutral. "Bella notte? Tonight? It's past business hours." Jin didn't explain. He never explained. Control meant knowing every detail, every face, every weakness. And lately, he'd been feeling like his control was slipping. Like the empire he'd built was a prison he'd locked himself inside with no key. The drive through Chicago's Christmas chaos should have annoyed him. The traffic was terrible. Tourists and locals flooding the magnificent mile with their shopping bags and holiday cheer. Families carrying wrapped presents. Couples holding hands, laughing at private jokes. Carolers on street corners singing about joy and peace. Everything he'd never had and never would. But tonight, instead of annoyance, it just made him feel more alone. Like he was watching life through glass, unable to touch it, unable to be part of it. Young Min navigated the traffic in practiced silence, occasionally glancing at Jin in the rearview mirror with something that might have been concern if young Min ever allowed himself such emotions. After 15 years together, surviving gang wars and police raids and rival attacks, young Min knew when to speak and when to stay quiet. Tonight was a quiet night. They pulled up to Bella Notte just after 8, the dinner rush in full swing. The Italian restaurant was one of Jin's 17 legitimate businesses scattered across Chicago. A high-end establishment where reservations required 6 weeks' notice and entrees cost $200. White tablecloths, imported wine, waiters in bow ties. His mother would have loved it, would have marveled at her dishwasher son owning such a place. The thought made his chest ache. The maitre d' nearly dropped his reservation book when Jin walked in. "Mr. Park," he stammered, his face going pale. "We didn't know you were coming tonight. Is there a problem?" "I'm checking inventory," Jin said quietly, watching the man's relief that he wasn't here to fire anyone or worse. Continue as normal. The dinner rush hummed with expensive perfume and champagne laughter. Jin moved through the dining room like a shadow, noting everything with the eye of someone who'd built an empire on attention to detail. The sommelier's pour technique, precise but slightly rushed. The busboy's efficiency, good but he missed a crumb on table 7. The way candlelight caught on crystal glasses, creating the illusion of warmth and intimacy that wealthy people paid for. Staff tensed when they saw him, conversations dropping to whispers, smiles becoming forced. Good. Fear meant respect. Respect meant control. Control meant survival. It was the only equation Jin understood anymore. Then, he saw her. The waitress balanced 4 plates with the grace of a dancer, despite exhaustion etched into every movement. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency. Her smile warm and genuine, even though Jin could see the weariness in her shoulders, the strain around her eyes. Keisha Williams, he remembered from the employee files he reviewed monthly. 2 years with the restaurant, never late, never complained, Tips averaged 18%, which was good for this location. But he'd never really looked at her before. Never seen her as anything more than a name on a spreadsheet. Now, he couldn't look away. She was beautiful in that bone-deep way that had nothing to do with makeup or expensive clothes. Rich mahogany skin that seemed to glow even in the dim restaurant lighting. Natural hair twisted into an elegant updo, a few curls escaping to frame her face. Warm brown eyes that still held kindness, despite obvious weariness, despite serving entitled customers who probably didn't see her as fully human. She wore her black uniform with dignity, moved with grace, smiled with genuine warmth at an elderly couple as she set down their meals. Jin found himself watching her more closely than he should, noticing details that had nothing to do with restaurant efficiency. The way she glanced at her phone between tables, anxiety flickering across her features. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, despite her professionalism. The way she paused in the hallway for just a second, closing her eyes, taking a deep breath like she was gathering strength to continue. She was struggling. He could see it in every line of her body. And something about that struggle called to him, reminded him of his mother working 3 jobs, exhausted but never breaking, never giving up. Keisha disappeared into the kitchen, and when she emerged minutes later, she didn't return to the dining room. Instead, she headed down the staff hallway, moving quickly, purposefully. Jin followed, telling himself he was just being thorough, checking all areas of the restaurant. The hallway was dimly lit, smelling of industrial cleaner and kitchen grease. It was empty, except for a small figure sitting in a chair that was far too big for her. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. Dark braids, adorned with red and green beads that clicked softly when she moved her head. A too-thin coat draped over the chair beside her, the zipper broken, the fabric worn at the elbows. Worn sneakers that had been white once, but were now gray with age and use, the laces mismatched. She colored in a tattered activity book, one of those cheap ones from the dollar store, her tongue peeking out in concentration as she worked to stay inside the lines of a Christmas tree. She was completely absorbed in her task, humming softly to herself a Christmas carol Jin didn't recognize. Jin stopped in the hallway, transfixed. When was the last time he'd seen a child? Really seen one? Not just passed them on the street? Or watched them from his car? When was the last time he'd been around innocence? Around someone who still believed in goodness and Christmas magic and staying inside the lines? The girl looked up, sensing his presence, and there was no fear in those bright, intelligent eyes. No wariness, no calculation, just pure curiosity. As if finding a strange man in a dark hallway was perfectly normal. "Are you the boss man my mama talks about?" Something in Jin's chest cracked. Adults looked at him with fear, with calculation, with greed, with respect that was really terror in disguise. This child just looked at him like he was a person, like he was human, like he mattered beyond his money and power. "I suppose I am," he heard himself say, his voice softer than it had been in years. He crouched to her level, surprising himself, making himself vulnerable in a way he never allowed. "What's your name?" "Amara," she said, smiling at him with gap-toothed innocence. "Amara Williams. What's yours?" When was the last time someone had asked his name? Really asked, not already knowing, not fearing to say it? "Jin," he said. "My name is Jin." "That's a pretty name," Amara said matter-of-factly. "Like a genie!" She giggled at her own joke, and the sound was so pure, so unspoiled by the world's cruelty, that Jin felt something in his chest he hadn't felt in 20 years. Joy, maybe, or hope. She showed him her coloring book, holding it up with pride. "I'm making this for my mama," she explained. "See? It's Santa and reindeer. She's sad this year 'cause we can't afford a real tree. Mama said, maybe next year when things are better." but I'm gonna make her paper decorations instead. See? I'm using red and green, so it looks really Christmassy. And I'm staying inside the lines mostly. That's important for making things beautiful, Mama says. The casual mention of poverty hit Jin harder than any punch he'd ever taken. He'd grown up poor in Seoul, so poor that some winters they chose between heating and eating. He remembered his mother stretching one chicken across 4 days of meals, remembered wearing shoes with holes in them, remembered the shame of free lunch tickets at school. He'd built his empire on the memory of that poverty, telling himself he'd never be poor again, never be powerless again, never be hungry again. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what poverty actually felt like. What it meant to be a child whose mama couldn't afford a Christmas tree. "Your mama works very hard," Jin said quietly, looking at this little girl who was making decorations out of dollar store coloring books because real decorations cost too much. "I know," Amara said, completely matter-of-fact about her circumstances. In that way, children are before the world teaches them shame. She works here and at another restaurant too. That's why I'm here tonight. Mrs. Chen, who usually watches me, got sick, and Mama couldn't miss work. But it's okay. I like it here. It smells good, and sometimes the cooks give me bread. She works 2 jobs, so I can stay in my school. I go to Woodlawn Elementary. It's a good school, Mama says. She wants me to have opportunities. That's what she always says. I'm gonna have opportunities. She beamed at the word, clearly proud of knowing such a big concept. My daddy used to help with my homework, but he's in heaven now. Jin's throat tightened. How long? 4 years, Amara said, her voice taking on the tone of a much older person, someone who'd learned grief too young. He was building something, and it fell on him. Mama says it was instant, that he didn't feel nothing. She says heaven is where people go when they love you so much they become stars, so they can watch you forever. She pointed upward. So, Daddy can see me all the time now. He sees me being good, and staying in school and taking care of Mama. Jin couldn't speak. This child had lost her father at 3 years old, was sitting in a restaurant hallway while her mother worked 2 jobs, was making Christmas decorations from trash because money was that tight, and she was still smiling. Still believing. Still good. You have an accent like Mrs. Lee at the grocery store, Amara observed, changing subjects with the randomness of children. Are you from Korea? Yes, Jin managed. From Seoul. That's the capital city. I know! Amara bounced in her chair with excitement. We learned about it in school. Mrs. Rodriguez says we're doing a unit on Asia after winter break. Did you know that Seoul has, like, 10 million people? And they have really fast internet, the fastest in the world. And they invented Taekwondo. He says it makes you strong and disciplined. What's disciplined mean? Jin found himself smiling, an expression that felt foreign on his face, like muscles he'd forgotten how to use. It means having control, doing what you're supposed to do even when it's hard. Oh, Amara said, like how I'm supposed to do my homework even when I want to watch TV. Exactly like that. You know a lot, Jin said, genuinely impressed. Do you like school? I love school, Amara said with the passion only children can muster. I like learning about places. Someday, I'm going to travel everywhere. Paris and London and Tokyo and Seoul. I'm going to see the whole world. Mama says, if you work hard and dream big, anything is possible. Her eyes shone with absolute belief. Do you believe that? Jin thought about his own journey. Seoul to Chicago with $200, dishwasher to restaurant owner to empire builder. In a way, he'd proven that very thing. But at what cost? Yes, he said quietly. I believe that. Before Jin could say more, footsteps rushed down the hallway, frantic and afraid. Amara? A woman's voice, tight with panic and barely controlled fear. Keisha appeared around the corner, still in her uniform, her face a mask of terror that transformed to relief when she saw her daughter, then transformed again to fear when she saw Jin crouched beside her. "Mr. Park," she breathed, and Jin heard everything in those two words. "Please don't fire me. Please don't hurt my child. Please have mercy. I'm so sorry. She's not supposed to be. I couldn't find anyone to watch her tonight, and I couldn't miss the shift. We need the money for rent. And I swear she's not bothering anyone. She'll be quiet. She won't cause problems. Please, sir, I need this job. I need it so much." Jin stood slowly, and Keisha immediately moved between him and her daughter. The movement was instinctive, primal, the mama bear protecting her cub. It reminded him so powerfully of his own mother stepping between him and his father's drunken rages that for a moment he couldn't breathe. "She's not bothering me," Jin said quietly, gently, in the voice he'd used with his own mother when she was afraid. "How old is she?" "7, Keisha said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "She just turned 7 last month. She's very well behaved. She won't disturb anyone. I'll make sure she—" "You shouldn't be working until midnight with a 7-year-old daughter waiting in a hallway," Jin interrupted. "What time does your shift end?" Keisha blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "Midnight," she said hesitantly. "Maybe later if we get a late rush. But I don't mind, sir. I'm grateful for the hours. That's too late for a child to be awake," Jin said, and pulled out his wallet. Keisha's eyes went wide as he extracted 5 crisp $100 bills, probably more money than she made in a week. "Go home," he said, pressing the money into her hand before she could protest. "Spend the evening with your daughter." "I can't," Keisha started, but Jin closed her fingers around the bills. "You can," he said firmly, with the tone that made his subordinates obey without question. "And you will." "Merry Christmas, Keisha." She stared at the money like it might disappear, like it might be a cruel trick. "Mr. Park, this is— Why would you?" "I don't understand." "You don't have to understand," Jin said. "Just take care of your daughter." He turned to leave, his good deed done, ready to return to his empty penthouse and his lonely life, ready to forget this moment of weakness, this crack in his armor. But a small hand caught his sleeve, warm and trusting and absolutely fearless. "Wait," Amara said, looking up at him with those impossibly bright eyes that still believed in goodness. "Are you going to be alone for Christmas?" The question landed like a physical blow, like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. Jin-Soo Park, who commanded a criminal empire spanning 6 neighborhoods, who had 50 men ready to die on his word, who'd killed rivals without hesitation and slept soundly afterward, he had no answer for this 7-year-old girl, because the truth was too pathetic to say out loud. Yes, he was going to be alone for Christmas. Yes, he was going to sit in his empty penthouse, drinking expensive soju and pretending he didn't care. Yes, he was going to watch other families celebrate through his floor-to-ceiling windows like a ghost watching the living. He faltered, his famous control deserting him. "I suppose I am." Amara's face crumpled with the kind of genuine distress only children possess, the kind of empathy that adults learn to suppress because feeling too much hurts too much. "But that's the saddest thing I ever heard." Her eyes filled with tears. "Nobody should be alone on Christmas. That's wrong. Right, Mama?" Keisha looked stunned, caught between gratitude for the money and confusion about this conversation, and terror about what her daughter was doing. "Baby," she started. "Mr. Park probably has. Come to our house." Amara interrupted, bouncing with sudden excitement, the sadness transforming to determination. "For Christmas, come to our house, please. We don't got much," she admitted with the honesty of childhood. "We can't afford turkey, so we're having chicken. And our apartment is really small, and our tree is fake, and we got it at Goodwill. But Mama makes the best mac and cheese in the whole world, and I got a new coloring book we can share, and we watch movies and sing songs. It'll be so fun. Please? Please come? Jin stared at this child who'd just invited a mafia boss to Christmas dinner like he was a lonely neighbor, like he was a normal person, deserving of kindness. She had no idea who he was, what he'd done, the blood on his hands. She just saw someone alone and offered inclusion. No fear, no agenda, no transaction, just pure, uncomplicated, devastating kindness. Amara, sweetie. Keisha's voice was gentle but firm, clearly mortified by her daughter's boldness. Mr. Park is very busy. He has important things. I'll come, Jin heard himself say, the words surprising everyone in that hallway. Most of all himself. Both Keisha and Amara froze, staring at him like he'd spoken in tongues. Jin met Keisha's shocked gaze, then looked down at Amara's delighted face. If the invitation is genuine, he said quietly, if you truly want me there, I'll come. Yes. Amara threw her arms around his legs with zero self-preservation instinct, with the absolute trust that children have before the world teaches them fear. Mama, he's coming. This is gonna be the best Christmas ever. Over the child's head, Jin saw Keisha's expression cycling through emotions too fast to name. Confusion, because why would a wealthy boss accept this invitation? Wariness, because something felt strange about this. But also something else, something deeper. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition, like she saw past the expensive suit and dangerous reputation to the lonely man underneath, the one who'd crouched down to talk to her daughter, who'd given them enough money to solve immediate problems, who'd said yes to Christmas dinner because being alone was worse than anything else. Christmas Eve, she said quietly, her voice steadier than her hands. 6 o'clock. I'll write down the address. She pulled out her order pad and scribbled quickly. We're in Englewood. It's not. She paused, searching for words. It's not a fancy neighborhood, Mr. Park. Jin, he said. Please, call me Jin. Jin, she repeated, testing the name. We're in Englewood. It's rough. And our apartment is small. Really small. And we don't have much. I don't need much, Jin said, taking the paper with her address. I just need company. Is that really all you want? Keisha asked, and Jin heard the question beneath the question. You're not expecting anything else? Are we safe with you? Nothing else, Jin promised. Just Christmas dinner? Just not being alone? Keisha studied him for a long moment, and Jin had the strange feeling she was seeing more than he wanted her to see, reading all the loneliness and desperation he tried to hide behind money and power. Finally, she nodded. Okay then, Christmas Eve. 6 o'clock. Don't be late, Amara added seriously. Mama works really hard on Christmas dinner. I won't be late, Jin promised, looking down at this child who'd just given him something to look forward to for the first time in years. I'll be there. Jin-Soo Park, untouchable emperor of Chicago's underworld, drove home that night with an address folded in his pocket, like a secret, like a lifeline, like a promise of something he'd thought he'd lost forever. The possibility of mattering to someone. Young Min kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, but wisely said nothing, though Jin could feel the questions hanging in the air between them. The penthouse felt colder than usual when Jin walked in, emptier, more like a mausoleum than a home. He poured another glass of soju and stood at the window, looking down at the city he owned but would never really be part of. Somewhere out there, in a neighborhood he controlled but never visited, Keisha Williams was tucking her daughter into bed, reading her stories, singing her songs, doing all the normal things mothers do, the things his own mother had done before poverty and his father's death had stolen her softness and replaced it with exhaustion. His phone buzzed. Young Min. Boss, everything okay? Yes, Jin replied, Why wouldn't it be? You gave that woman $500. You never do that. You don't know her situation. And you accepted a dinner invitation from staff. That's unusual, boss. Go home, young Min, Jin said, not unkindly. Spend time with your family. Yes, boss. Jin ended the call and looked at the address again. Englewood, one of the roughest neighborhoods in Chicago, a place where his money and power had created as many problems as it solved. A place where kids sold drugs on corners and violence was a daily reality, and hope was a luxury most people couldn't afford. A place where a woman worked 2 jobs to keep her daughter safe and fed, to keep her in a good school, to give her opportunities. A place where a 7-year-old girl still believed that kindness mattered, that inviting lonely people to dinner was the right thing to do. He should cancel. Send an expensive gift instead. Maintain the distance between his world and theirs. It was safer that way. Safer for them. Safer for him. Safer for everyone. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Amara's bright smile and heard her words. Nobody should be alone on Christmas. Jin didn't sleep well that night. He dreamed of his mother, young and healthy and happy, cooking in their tiny apartment in Seoul before everything fell apart. She was singing, something she'd stopped doing after his father died, after poverty crushed the music out of her. In the dream, she looked at him with such disappointment that he woke with tears on his face. "Jin-ah," she said in Korean, "when did you become so cold? When did you forget that money isn't the same as wealth? That power isn't the same as strength? That surviving isn't the same as living?" He woke with tears on his face, her words echoing in his mind. December 23rd dawned gray and cold. The sky, the color of old concrete, threatening snow that wouldn't come. Jin went to his office in the building he owned, surrounded by the machinery of his empire, and tried to focus on business. There were territory disputes that needed mediating, protection payments that were late, shipments coming in from overseas that required his approval, the constant maintenance that keeping an empire required. But his mind kept drifting to a little girl with beaded braids and a mother who worked herself to exhaustion. Young Min brought him the daily briefing at 10, a folder full of problems that needed solving, enemies that needed handling, opportunities that needed seizing. Jin barely listened, his usual laser focus scattered and diffuse. "Boss," Young Min said finally, setting down the folder, "are you listening to any of this?" "What?" "Yes. Handle it." "You never delegate like this," Young Min said, and now there was definite concern in his voice. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," Jin said, but his phone buzzed at that moment, undermining his words. A text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a photo that made his chest tight. Amara using the art supplies, bright colors everywhere, paint on her face and hands, her smile so big it seemed to take up the whole screen. Pure joy captured in pixels. The message read, "She's been painting all morning. Thank you for the supplies. This was too much, but thank you. We're not used to kindness. Keisha." Jin found himself smiling at his phone. Really smiling. The expression feeling strange on his face after years of cold masks. Young Min stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Boss," he said slowly, "are you smiling?" "Don't be ridiculous," Jin said, but the smile didn't fade, and Young Min's eyes widened. "Who is she?" "No one. Boss, I've known you 15 years. I've never seen you smile at your phone. I've never seen you smile at anything, except when we eliminate a rival. Who is she?" "Just—" Jin paused, searching for words. "Someone I met. Someone important." Young Min's concern deepened. "Important how? That's what worries me." Later that afternoon, Jin had a meeting with his lieutenants, 6 men who controlled different aspects of his operation, men who'd proven their loyalty with blood and time. They discussed expansion plans into new territories, problematic competitors who needed to be dealt with, The usual business of empire building. One lieutenant, a scarred veteran named Dae Jung, mentioned a restaurant owner who was 3 weeks late on protection payments. "He's struggling," Dae Jung said with a shrug. "Business is down. What do you want us to do?" "Rough him up," another lieutenant suggested. "Send a message. Break something valuable. Make sure everyone knows we don't accept excuses." The others nodded in agreement. It was standard procedure, had been for years. But Jin's hand stilled on his glass of water, Amara's words echoing in his mind. "Mama works 2 jobs. We can't afford a real tree." "Does he have family?" Jin asked. The room went silent. His men exchanged confused glances. "The restaurant owner," Jin clarified. "Does he have children?" I don't know, boss," Dae Jung stammered. "I don't think anyone asked." "Find out," Jin ordered, his voice steel wrapped in silk. "And if he has children, give him an extension. 3 months. No interest, no penalties, just time." "Boss!" Dae Jung started carefully. "That's not how we—" "I know how we operate," Jin interrupted, his voice cold enough to freeze fire. "I'm telling you how we're going to operate from now on. Families struggling to survive get mercy, not violence." "Am I clear?" "Yes, boss," they chorused. But Jin could see the confusion in their faces, the wondering about what was happening to their cold, ruthless leader. Crystal clear. After the meeting, Young Min pulled him aside into Jin's private office, the one with bulletproof windows and 3 separate exits. "Boss," he said without preamble, "what's happening to you?" "What do you mean? You just showed mercy to someone late on payments. You're smiling at your phone. You're distracted. The men are starting to talk, starting to wonder if you're going soft." "Let them wonder," Jin said. "The woman," Young Min continued, ignoring the warning in Jin's voice. "The one from the restaurant, the one with the daughter." "Yes, you care about them," Young Min said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes," Jin admitted. "I do. That's dangerous, boss. For them, for you. People will see it as weakness. Our rivals will use them as leverage." "I know," Jin said quietly. "And you're doing it anyway?" Jin thought about Christmas Eve, about a little girl who wasn't afraid of him, about a mother who worked 2 jobs and still made time to read bedtime stories. He thought about invitation instead of isolation, about kindness instead of fear, about the possibility of being something other than alone. "Yes," he said. "I'm doing it anyway." Young Min studied him for a long moment, and Jin prepared himself for arguments, for warnings, for all the logical reasons this was a terrible idea. Instead, Young Min smiled, rare and genuine. "Good," he said simply. "Good?" Jin repeated, surprised. "You've been dying inside for years, boss," Young Min said quietly. "Walking through life like a ghost, building an empire, but having nothing that actually matters. Maybe this woman and her daughter can bring you back to life. Maybe they can help you remember what you're actually surviving for." "Maybe," Jin said, his throat tight. "Or maybe I'll destroy them. That's my fear. That everything I touch turns to ash." "Then don't touch them," Young Min said pragmatically. "Walk away. Leave them alone. Protect them by staying away." "I can't," Jin admitted. "I already tried. I already care." "Then we make sure nothing bad happens to them," Young Min said firmly. "I'll assign a discreet security detail. They'll never know they're being watched. We'll make sure they're safe." Jin felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Gratitude. Hope. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you, brother." Young Min headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Boss?" "Yes?" "Your mother would be proud. You're finally choosing something other than revenge and empire building." Jin couldn't speak past the emotion lodging in his throat. He could only nod. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow blanketing Chicago in white that would turn gray by afternoon. The city transformation into something clean and new, before reality reasserted itself. Jin stood in his massive walk-in closet, surrounded by suits that cost thousands of dollars each, and realized he had absolutely no idea what to wear to a family dinner in Englewood. Everything he owned screamed money and power. Everything announced that he didn't belong in normal spaces with normal people. He settled finally on dark jeans, the most casual thing he owned, and a black cashmere sweater that had cost $800 but at least looked relatively simple. He studied himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man, looking back. When was the last time he'd worn jeans? When was the last time he'd dressed to fit in, rather than dominate? Young Min was waiting in the kitchen when Jin emerged, and his eyebrows rose slightly at Jin's outfit. "Going casual, boss?" "Don't start," Jin warned. But there was no heat in it. "The trunk is loaded," Young Min said. "Korean ingredients, the art supplies, the gifts. Everything you requested." "Thank you." Jin paused. "You don't have to drive me. Spend Christmas Eve with your family." "Boss," Young Min said gently, "you are my family, the only family I've got. So I'm driving you, and that's final." They loaded into Jin's Aston Martin. Too expensive, too flashy. But it was the most understated of his cars. The drive from the Gold Coast to Englewood was like traveling through different countries, from luxury high-rises to shabby apartment buildings, from boutiques selling $1,000 handbags to check-cashing stores with bulletproof glass, from safety to danger, from wealth to poverty, from his world to theirs. Jin's world was everywhere, even here. He recognized gang tags on the walls, knew which crews controlled which blocks, knew that some of them worked for him without knowing his face. It was strange to see the street-level reality of the empire he'd built from his penthouse tower. Young Min pulled up outside a 3-story walk-up. The building was old but maintained, showing signs of residents who cared despite limited resources. Christmas lights strung along the entrance, a small attempt at festivity in a hard neighborhood. A group of young men on the corner watched the Aston Martin with calculation in their eyes, already planning how to steal it if it stayed too long. "Your security team is in position," Young Min said quietly. 2 men on the roof across the street, 2 in the van at the corner, 2 more on foot patrol. They'll keep watch. Anyone comes near with bad intentions, they'll handle it quietly. "Thank you, brother," Jin said, gathering bags from the trunk. Expensive wine, Korean ingredients, gifts wrapped in paper that cost more than most people spent on presents. "Have a good Christmas, boss," Young Min said, and there was warmth in his voice. "You deserve it." Jin climbed the worn stairs to the 3rd floor, his heart pounding harder with each step. This was ridiculous. He'd faced down rivals with guns pointed at his head and walked away without his pulse rising. He'd negotiated deals worth millions with ice in his veins. He'd ordered deaths and slept soundly after. But climbing these stairs to knock on Keisha's door made his hands actually shake. Door 3C was marked with a wreath, made entirely of construction paper, clearly Amara's work, with "Merry Christmas" spelled out in glitter glue. Jin raised his hand to knock, then paused, suddenly uncertain. What was he doing? What was he thinking? A crime lord at a family Christmas? This was madness. But before he could second-guess himself into fleeing, the door flew open. "You came!" Amara launched herself at his legs, wrapping her arms around him with the absolute trust only children possess. With zero fear or hesitation, Jin froze, his hands full of bags, still learning how to accept physical affection after years of being untouched, except in violence. Then slowly, carefully, he set the bags down and rested one hand on her braided hair, feeling the beads under his palm, feeling the warmth and trust and absolute acceptance. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I told Mama you'd come." Amara looked up at him with pure joy lighting her face. "She didn't believe me, but I knew. You said you'd come, and you came." Keisha appeared in the doorway, and Jin's breath caught. She wore jeans that hugged her curves, and a red sweater that brought out the warm undertones in her skin. Her natural hair was loose in twists that framed her face, falling to her shoulders. No makeup beyond maybe lip gloss, no uniform, no work mask, just herself, relaxed and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with money or trying. "I'm so sorry," she said with a laugh, gently extracting Amara from his legs. "She's been watching out the window for an hour, convinced you'd be early. Please, come in. And I have to say, I half expected you to back out, for my daughter to be disappointed. For this to have been too strange for you. I don't break my word," Jin said quietly, picking up the bags and stepping inside. "Especially not to children. Especially not to people who've shown me kindness." The apartment was tiny, maybe 600 square feet total. Living room barely big enough for a couch and TV, kitchen visible beyond barely big enough for 2 people, a hallway that probably led to 2 small bedrooms, and a bathroom. But it was warm. The scent of cooking filled the air, soul food that Jin didn't recognize but that made his mouth water. Collard greens and cornbread, and something sweet and savory all at once. The small artificial tree in the corner was covered in homemade ornaments, paper stars, and painted pine cones, and photos in cheap frames and popcorn strings. Dollar store tinsel and lights that didn't quite all work. But it was beautiful in its sincerity. The walls were covered with pictures, real photos of real memories. Amara as a baby, fat and happy. A man who must be Darius, handsome and smiling. His arm around a younger Keisha, who looked at him like he hung the moon. Birthday parties with homemade cakes. School photos showing Amara growing up year by year. Halloween costumes made from creativity instead of money. Family barbecues and Christmas mornings and everyday moments captured and treasured. Jin's penthouse had expensive art on the walls, pieces that cost more than most people made in a year. But it had no memories, no love, no life. This tiny apartment was rich in ways his wealth could never buy. "This is for you," he said, offering Keisha the cashmere scarf, deep burgundy soft enough to make her gasp when she touched it. "Mr. Park," she started, but he interrupted gently. "Jin, please. Call me Jin." "Jin," she repeated, and the way his name sounded in her voice did something strange to his pulse. "This is beautiful. And this is too much. You've already done so much? It's Christmas," he said simply. "And this is for you, Amara." He handed her the largest bag. Amara tore into it with gleeful abandon, the way kids do when presents are rare enough to be special. She pulled out the premium art set, her eyes getting wider with each item she discovered. Watercolors and acrylics and pastels. Colored pencils in 100 different shades. Sketchbooks with real paper, not the cheap kind that tore. Brushes in every size. "Mama! Look! It's got everything!" Amara's voice rose with excitement. "It's got oil pastels and watercolors, and—" She kept pulling out items, her joy building with each discovery. "This is the best present ever! Better than anything!" Jin's chest felt tight watching her joy. When was the last time he'd made someone this happy? When was the last time money had actually bought something that mattered? Keisha's eyes were wet with tears she was trying to hide. "Jin, this is too much. This whole set probably cost. It doesn't matter what it cost," Jin said gently. "What matters is that Amara loves it, that she'll use it, that it brings joy. That's worth everything." Keisha looked at him for a long moment, and Jin had the feeling she was seeing past his words to the loneliness underneath, the need to matter to someone, the hunger for connection that money couldn't satisfy. "Thank you," she said quietly, "not just for the gifts, for being here, for seeing us, for—" her voice caught, "for being kind." "I should thank you," Jin said, and meant it. "You're giving me something I haven't had in 20 years. You're giving me Christmas." The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people, but they made it work. Jin unpacked his ingredients, while Keisha checked on the food already cooking, and they moved around each other in the small space, with a surprising lack of awkwardness. Their shoulders brushed as they reached for the same utensil. Their hands touched when she handed him a cutting board. Each accidental contact sent electricity through Jin that he hadn't felt in years. Hadn't let himself feel because feeling anything was dangerous when you built your life on being cold. So, Keisha said as she stirred collard greens that filled the apartment with a smell Jin didn't recognize, but that made him hungry anyway. 17 years in Chicago. That's a long time. What brought you here? The truth? Or what I tell people? The truth, she said. We're past polite lies, I think. If you're going to be in my kitchen on Christmas Eve, I want to know the real you. Poverty, Jin said honestly. After my father died, there was nothing left in Seoul. My mother worked 3 jobs, but it was never enough. I was 7, and taking care of my baby sister, buying groceries, cooking dinner, making sure we had heat in winter. I grew up way too fast. And you came here for opportunities? For survival, Jin corrected. I came here because staying meant slowly starving. I came here because America represented possibility. Even if that possibility was just washing dishes for $3 an hour. And did you find it? Jin paused in his cutting, the knife hovering over beef he was slicing for bulgogi. Did you find better? I found money, he said finally. Power. Success. Everything I thought I wanted. But better? He met her eyes across the small kitchen. No, not until recently. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding that went deeper than words. What about you? Jin asked. Chicago, born and raised? Keisha nodded, and pride crept into her voice. South Side, born and raised. My family's been here 4 generations. My great-grandparents came up from Mississippi during the Great Migration, looking for work and opportunity and freedom from Jim Crow. My grandmother marched with Dr. King. My father worked at the steel mills before they closed and destroyed this neighborhood's economy. We've got deep roots here, deep history. This is home, even with all its problems. And Darius? Jin asked carefully. If you don't mind me asking. Your husband. I saw the pictures. I don't mind, Keisha said softly, and her voice took on a different quality. Warm, with remembered love, but sad with loss. We met in high school. He was the sweetest boy I'd ever met, always making me laugh, always treating me like I was precious. We got married young, maybe too young by some people's standards, had Amara right away. He worked construction, hard physical labor that wore him down, but he loved it. Loved building things, creating something from nothing. Her voice caught. 4 years ago, scaffolding collapse on a job site. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. She wiped her eyes. Amara barely remembers him, and that kills me. She was only 3, but I tell her stories every night. Make sure she knows her daddy loved her. Make sure she knows where she comes from. I'm so sorry, Jin said, and the pain in her voice was real enough to touch. That's not. He paused. That's not fair. That's not right. Life's not fair, Keisha said with the weary wisdom of someone who'd learned that lesson young. We don't get to choose what happens to us. We just get to choose how we respond. And I chose to keep going for Amara, to make sure my baby girl has opportunities her father never got to see her achieve. That's what Darius would have wanted. He sounds like a good man, Jin said quietly. He was the best, Keisha said, and smiled through her tears. Kind and funny and hardworking, and so full of love, it just radiated from him. Everyone who met him liked him. He'd want me to be happy again, she continued, and now her eyes met Jin's directly. He told me once, if anything ever happened to him, I should find love again. He said life was too short to be alone. That love wasn't a finite resource. That opening my heart again wouldn't diminish what we had. It would honor it. Are you? Jin asked carefully, his heart pounding. Happy? Getting there, Keisha said, and the look she gave him made his breath catch. Slowly, but surely. I'm getting there. Amara provided constant background entertainment, singing Christmas songs off-key while she experimented with her new art supplies at the kitchen table, getting paint on her hands and face, and not caring at all. Mama, look! I painted Jin! She held up a watercolor that was abstract and colorful, barely recognizable as a person, but somehow capturing something essential. It's beautiful, Jin said sincerely, and he meant it. The joy in every brushstroke was worth more than the expensive art in his penthouse. Can I keep it? Really? Amara's eyes went wide. You want my painting? I do, Jin said firmly. I'll hang it in my home. It'll be my most precious piece of art. Amara beamed and immediately started another painting, determined now to create a whole series for Jin. They worked together in easy rhythm, Jin cooking bulgogi and japchae and kimchi jjigae, while Keisha finished her soul food. The kitchen filled with the fusion of their cultures, Korean spices, mixing with Southern comfort food, creating something entirely new, something that belonged to neither culture alone, but to both, together. You're good at this, Keisha observed, watching him work with the skill of someone who'd done it thousands of times. Cooking. You move like a professional. My mother taught me, Jin said, and his voice went soft with memory. After my father died, she worked constantly. Morning shift at a factory, afternoon shift cleaning offices, night shift at a restaurant. She was never home. So she taught me to cook before she'd let me come to America. She said, a man who couldn't feed himself wasn't really a man. She said self-sufficiency was the most important skill she could give me. She sounds like she was amazing. She was, Jin said. Smart and strong, and so tired all the time. She worked herself to death, trying to give me and my sister a better life. And he stopped, his hands stilling. I wasn't there when she died. I was in the middle of a territory war, consolidating power, building my empire. And my own mother died alone in Seoul, and I couldn't even come to her funeral. Jin, Keisha said gently, and her hand covered his on the cutting board. I'm sure she understood. I'm sure she knew you loved her. She died ashamed of me, Jin said, the words he'd never spoken aloud to anyone spilling out. My sister told me. Her last words were wishing she'd never let me come to America, wishing I'd stayed poor and honorable instead of becoming rich and corrupt. That's what my choices cost me. My mother's pride, my sister's love, my own humanity, piece by piece. Keisha squeezed his hand. That's not all you are. That's not who you are right now. In my kitchen, teaching my daughter about Korean food and making her laugh. People can change, Jin. People can choose to be better. Can they? Jin asked, meeting her eyes. Can someone like me really change? I don't know, Keisha said honestly, but I believe they can try. And trying is what matters. They stood there for a long moment, hands touching, the kitchen warm around them, and Jin felt something unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. Or just the simple comfort of being seen and not immediately rejected. Okay? Amara announced from the table. The table is set. Jin and Keisha broke apart, the spell breaking but not disappearing. Just transforming into something quieter, something that would wait. They carried food to the small dining table that Amara had covered, with a paper tablecloth she'd colored with Christmas trees and snowmen and stars. 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 glasses of water. A family dinner. Jin's throat felt tight. When was the last time he'd sat down to a meal that wasn't a business meeting or eaten alone? This felt like something he'd thought he'd lost. Forever. This felt like family. Amara insisted on saying grace, reaching for Jin's hand on one side and Keisha's on the other, creating a circle of connection. Jin held their hands carefully, like they might break, like this moment might shatter if he held too tight or not tight enough. "Dear God," Amara said with her eyes squeezed shut tight in concentration, "thank you for this food, and for Mama who worked so hard to make it, and for my daddy watching from heaven, and for bringing us Jin so he's not lonely anymore. Please bless us and keep us safe, and make sure everyone in the world has enough food tonight, especially the homeless people, and the kids in foster care, and anyone who's alone. Amen." "Amen," Keisha echoed, her voice thick with emotion. Jin couldn't speak past the emotion lodging in his throat. A 7-year-old child was praying for him, for everyone, with a heart so big it seemed impossible it fit in such a small body. He just squeezed Amara's hand gently, hoping she'd understand. The meal was incredible. Not because of the food quality, though that was genuinely excellent, but because of the atmosphere. Amara chattered constantly, telling stories about school and her friends, and everything she wanted to be when she grew up. She wanted to be an artist, a teacher, a veterinarian, an astronaut, everything all at once, because the world was full of possibilities, and she hadn't learned yet that she'd have to choose. Keisha laughed and corrected her daughter's more exaggerated tales, her face relaxed and happy in a way Jin suspected she didn't get to be when she was working 2 jobs and worrying about rent. Jin found himself talking more than he had in years, answering Amara's endless questions about Korea and Taekwondo and what it was like to move to a new country where you didn't speak the language. He told them about his first day in Chicago, getting off the plane with $200 in one suitcase, and no idea what came next. About washing dishes in a Chinatown restaurant for months, learning English from the TV in the break room. About saving every penny, living on ramen, sleeping in a basement room with 5 other guys. About the slow climb from dishwasher to line cook to assistant manager. He left out the parts about intimidation and protection, money and violence. Those stories weren't for Christmas dinner. Those stories weren't for Amara's innocent ears. But he told them the truth about poverty and struggle and determination. "Do you miss Seoul?" Amara asked through a mouthful of mac and cheese. "Sometimes," Jin admitted. "I miss the food, the language, the way the city smells in spring. I miss knowing where I come from, having roots that go deep. But Chicago is home now. I've been here longer than I lived in Seoul. This is where I built my life. Mama says home isn't a place," Amara said with the wisdom children sometimes possess. "She says home is the people you love. That's why we're still home, even though Daddy's gone. Because we still love each other." "Your mama is very wise," Jin said, meeting Keisha's eyes across the table. She smiled at him, soft and warm, and Jin felt something shift in his chest, something dangerous and wonderful and terrifying. After dinner, they washed dishes together, Jin washing and Keisha drying, working in comfortable rhythm while Amara set up the living room for movie time. "This is nice," Keisha said quietly, her voice barely audible over the running water. "Having someone to share the work. I'm usually doing everything alone. All of it. Work and parenting and life. It's exhausting, being alone." "You don't have to be alone," Jin said, then caught himself. "I mean, if you ever need help, with anything, I'm here now. I want to be here." "Are you?" Keisha turned to face him, setting down the dish towel. "Because Jin, I need to know what this is. You're my boss. You're clearly very wealthy. You're powerful in ways I probably don't even understand. And you're spending Christmas Eve washing dishes in my kitchen? What do you want from this? From us? Honestly?" Jin set down the dish he was holding, giving her his full attention. "I don't know exactly. I've never—" He struggled for words. "I've never had this. Normal, peaceful, real. In my world, everything is transaction. Business or fear or money or power. But you and Amara, you don't want anything from me except company. And that's," he laughed softly, "that's everything. That's what I've been missing for 20 years and didn't even know it." "Jin," Keisha said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay, are you a good man or a bad man? Because Amara is already attached to you. I can see it. She talks about you constantly. And I won't let her get hurt. I won't let her love someone who's going to break her heart or put her in danger. So, I need to know. Who are you really?" Jin met her eyes directly, not flinching from the question even though the answer made him ashamed. "I've done bad things," he said honestly. "Hurt people, made decisions that haunt me, prioritized money and power over humanity. In the eyes of the law, in the eyes of God, if there is one, I'm probably a bad man. I've killed people, Keisha. Not recently, but yes, I've killed. I've destroyed lives. I've built an empire on fear. But I have never, and would never, hurt a child. And I would die, literally die, before I let anything happen to you or Amara." "That's not really an answer," Keisha said, but her voice was gentle, not accusing. "I know," Jin said, "because I don't have a good answer. I'm not a good man, Keisha. I don't think I have been for a long time. But around you two, I want to be. You make me want to be better. You make me remember what it felt like to be human, instead of just a machine that accumulates power." Keisha searched his face for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. "That's enough for now. That's honest. And I appreciate honest. But Jin, if you're going to be part of our lives, you need to be all in. Amara doesn't do halfway. She loves completely, or not at all. And if you break her heart, if you make her love you, and then disappear—" "I'm in," Jin said immediately. "Completely. I promise you, Keisha, I'm not going anywhere." The words felt like a vow. They settled in the living room for movie time, Amara having queued up the Polar Express with the excited commentary that Jin had never seen it. And this was a tragedy that needed immediate correction. Jin found himself sandwiched between Keisha and Amara on the couch that was small enough that they were all pressed together, sharing warmth and space. At first, Jin sat rigidly, his back straight, unsure how to handle the physical closeness after years of being untouched, except in violence. But gradually, so gradually he barely noticed, he relaxed. Amara curled against his side like it was the most natural thing in the world, her head resting on his arm, her warmth seeping into him. Keisha was on his other side, their thighs touching, her shoulder occasionally brushing his when she shifted position. The movie played, but Jin barely watched it. He was too absorbed in the feeling of belonging, of being included, of mattering to someone. This was what normal people had. This was what he'd traded for power and money and fear. And sitting here, he couldn't understand why he'd ever thought that trade was worth it. Amara's breathing grew slower, deeper, her body relaxing completely against him. "She's asleep," Keisha whispered, her voice fond. "She always tries so hard to stay up for Christmas Eve. Always fails." Jin looked down at the little girl using his arm as a pillow, at her peaceful face and her braids with the beads and the trust in her sleeping features. "She's perfect," he said softly. "She is," Keisha agreed. "And she's already in love with you? You know that, right?" "That's dangerous," Jin said, voicing his deepest fear. "Why?" "Because people I care about get hurt," Jin said. "My world is violent, Keisha. More violent than you probably imagine. I've spent 20 years building walls to keep people out, to keep them safe from me." "Then don't let anything happen to her," Keisha said simply. "You're powerful, right? Use that power to protect her. Protect us. But be here. Be present. That's what she needs more than safety. She needs people who love her." "Do you?" Keisha asked. "Love her?" Jin looked at Amara's peaceful face, at her complete trust, at the way she'd invited him into their lives without hesitation or fear, at how she'd seen his loneliness and responded with kindness instead of using it against him. "Yes," he said, and the certainty surprised him. "I do love her." "Then, that's enough," Keisha said. The movie ended, and Jin carefully lifted Amara, cradling her against his chest. She stirred, but didn't wake, just mumbled something about trains and snow and Christmas. "Where?" Jin asked. Keisha led him down the hallway to a small bedroom that was entirely Amara's kingdom. The walls were covered in butterflies she'd drawn and cut out. The ceiling had glow-in-the-dark stars arranged in constellations. A bookshelf overflowed with library books and worn paperbacks. It was small and shabby, and absolutely perfect. Jin laid her gently in bed, and she looked so small, so vulnerable. He thought about his own childhood, about being 7 and too adult, about losing innocence too young, about responsibility that crushed joy. Amara still had her innocence, still believed in goodness and Christmas magic. He'd do everything in his power to preserve that. "Jin," Amara murmured, half asleep. "Yes, little one? Will you come back? For New Year's?" Jin glanced at Keisha, who looked as surprised as he felt. "Do you want me to?" "Uh-huh." Amara's eyes fluttered open briefly. "You're part of our family now. You can't just visit once. Family means forever." The words landed like a blow and a blessing all at once, knocking the breath from Jin's lungs. Family. Forever. Concepts he'd thought he'd lost. "Then I'll come back," Jin promised, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll always come back. I promise you, Amara." Amara smiled, satisfied, and drifted fully to sleep. Keisha tucked the blankets around her daughter with such tenderness that Jin's chest ached, kissed her forehead, whispered something too soft for Jin to hear. Then they returned to the living room, leaving the door cracked so they'd hear if Amara woke. Keisha poured them each a glass of wine, cheap but good enough, and they sat back down on the couch. But now there was no child between them, just space that felt charged with possibility and danger, and everything Jin had been avoiding for 20 years. "Thank you," Keisha said quietly, "for today, for being patient with Amara, for cooking and doing dishes, and playing along with her endless questions and being here. Really here. Not just physically present, but actually engaged. Thank you for inviting me," Jin said, and his voice was raw with honesty. "This was the best Christmas I've had in 20 years, maybe ever. Since my mother died, I've spent every holiday alone. I thought that's what I deserved, what I'd chosen. But Amara, she saw me and offered kindness. No judgment, no agenda, just pure kindness." "You really have been alone that long?" Keisha asked. "More or less," Jin admitted. "After my mother died, I cut everyone off. Threw myself into work, into building the empire, into accumulating power like it meant something. I told myself it was enough, that money and control and fear-based respect were enough. But they weren't." "No," Keisha agreed. "Money doesn't keep you warm at night. Doesn't make you laugh. Doesn't care if you live or die." They sat in comfortable silence, watching snow fall outside the window. The Christmas lights from neighboring buildings twinkled like stars. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed midnight, marking Christmas officially arriving. "Jin," Keisha said eventually, "can I ask what you really do? Your real business? Not the restaurant. The other things." Jin had known this question would come eventually. He could lie, could deflect, could maintain the walls. But Keisha had been honest with him about her life, her loss, her struggles. She'd let him into her home and her daughter's heart. She deserved truth, even if that truth might send him away. "I own legitimate businesses," he said carefully. "Restaurants like Bella Notte, real estate, construction companies, things that look good on paper and actually turn profit. But I also control other enterprises. Protection. Some import-export that isn't entirely legal. I'm what people call a crime lord, though I prefer to think of myself as a businessman who operates in gray areas. Keisha absorbed this, her face unreadable. Are you violent? When necessary, Jin said honestly, not trying to soften it. I don't enjoy it. I take no pleasure in hurting people, but I'm very good at it. And my reputation for violence is what keeps me safe. What keeps my organization intact. What keeps rivals from testing me. Have you killed people? Yes. Jin met her eyes. I've killed people, Keisha. Not recently, not in several years. But yes, in self-defense sometimes, in defense of my territory other times, because it was them or me. Because if I showed weakness, I'd be dead. I'm not proud of it. But I won't lie to you. Keisha's breath hitched, but she didn't pull away, didn't flinch, didn't run. She set down her wine glass carefully. I should be terrified of you right now, she said quietly. I should tell you to leave and never come back. Every instinct should be screaming at me to protect my daughter from someone capable of violence. But you carried my daughter to bed like she was made of glass, Jin. You cooked dinner in my kitchen and laughed at her jokes and looked at me like I'm the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. You're sitting here confessing your sins instead of lying to make yourself look better. You're not what I expected a crime lord to be. What did you expect? Someone colder, cruel, heartless. The kind of man who'd take what he wanted without asking, who'd use people and discard them. But you're not that. You're lonely and broken and trying so hard to be good, trying so hard to be worthy of the kindness my daughter showed you. I see you, Jin. The real you under all the power and fear and violence. I see the man you could be, want to be. No one said that to me in 20 years, Jin said, his voice breaking. No one's seen me in 20 years. Not really. Not past the money and the reputation and the empire. I see you, Keisha repeated. And I'm not scared. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. Maybe that makes me crazy. But there it is. They were close now. Close enough that Jin could see every detail of her face. The warmth in her eyes. The slight part of her lips. The pulse beating in her throat. He wanted to kiss her with an intensity that shook him to his core. But this was too important to rush, too precious to risk. I should go, he said, though he didn't move at all. It's late, past midnight now, Christmas Day. Or, Keisha said softly, you could stay. On the couch, I mean. It's snowing harder now. And she paused, vulnerable. I don't want you to go. Not yet. Jin's heart hammered against his ribs. Keisha, stay, she said again. Please. So he did. She brought him blankets and a pillow that smelled like lavender, and he stretched out on her couch that was too small for his frame, and it was the most comfortable he'd been in years. Not because of physical comfort, but because of emotional safety. Because someone wanted him there. Because he wasn't alone. Good night, Jin, Keisha said from her bedroom doorway. Good night, Keisha. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me. Same time New Year's Eve? She smiled. Same time, Jin agreed. Keisha disappeared into her room, and Jin lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of the apartment settling. The distant noise of the city. The peace of being in a home instead of a mausoleum. For the first time in 20 years, Jinsu Park fell asleep, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he could be more than the monster he'd made himself into. And down the hall, Keisha Williams lay awake, thinking about the dangerous man sleeping on her couch, the man who'd looked at her daughter with wonder, and at her with something that might be love. She should be afraid. But all she felt was hope. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories about redemption, love, and second chances. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness changed everything? Share your stories with us. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to change, never too late to choose love,